Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. I will call the December 20th Select Board meeting to order. Is somebody's mic on? Oh. In regard to changes to the agenda, I know Brooke has an additional announcement under that we'll do under Select Board announcements and comments. And under the public hearings, my understanding is that number 1 is going to be continued to a date certain. So I'm not sure if we would just want to do that off the bat. Okay, well, we'll wait and take it up later in the meeting, but just in case anyone's watching or here for that, it will be continued. With that, we'll accept the agenda and move to announcements. Libby?
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. Town offices will be closed next Monday, December 25th, in observance of Christmas, and also on Monday, January 1st, in observance of New Year's Day. Therefore, there will be no select board meetings on next Wednesday, December 27th, or Wednesday, January 3rd, and we're back at it on Wednesday, January 10th. The select board will be holding its annual public hearing on the proposed upcoming fiscal 2025 general fund budget on Wednesday, January 10th, here at your regular meeting at 5:30. We have the sewer director here. David's going to give us an update on the sewer force main project.
Yeah. Thank you, Libby. Good evening, everyone. David Gray, sewer director. We are in full swing on Lily Street and the North Liberty Street area. That's going along very well. We started with a slight delay because of the weather over on Atlantic. We ended up starting on Tuesday, and they're moving along really good over there. They had the town's tree arborist over there today trimming the 1860-something oak tree that's there, whatever, elm tree. He was there doing the trimming today, as well as some other trees along the way so that we don't hit anything and try to stay out of causing any damage to the trees. We are using the Silver Street parking lot as staging for gravel currently. And we have all of our seismic sensors in place along Atlantic and along Lily Street. I've met with many of the homeowners on both areas. I was meeting with some folks today over on Lily Street. So it's going well. And anytime we have questions, people get to me or we send them off to the engineers, but it's going well so far.
Great. Any questions?
Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas, everybody.
My only
Merry
question,
Christmas.
how close was the water? I heard it was getting close.
We had water coming through the fence, so it was very close. So, but we had the surveyors out yesterday, so I'll have numbers coming up.
All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, David.
That's it for me.
Okay. Moving to select board announcements and comments. Brooke?
I'd like to say again for everyone to mark their calendars, January 11th, that's a Thursday evening at 6 p.m. There'll be a hybrid meeting on solid waste. It's meant to be a full update on current operations and where we're headed with the expiration of the waste options contract in 2025. So I encourage everyone to come along and ask questions, and it will be in this room, but also available to attend online.
Anyone else? Okay, I don't believe there's any follow-up from prior select board meetings. This is the public comment portion of our agenda for anything that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Are there any public comments this evening? I don't see anyone in the audience or any hands online. There's no new business that I'm aware of. We will move to approval of minutes, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Are there questions on the contracts?
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor? Is Malcolm's not on, right? I haven't seen him. Okay. So no roll call unless he pops in. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously, 4-0.
My only comment, there was 2 or 3 electric chargers that are going at the beaches, and I think that's great. But I would like to think, is there anywhere, I mean, how often are they gonna be used there? Maybe it'll be constant. We'll find out. And where is there we can put them there where they'll be the most used? And I don't have the answer to that, but sometimes just because it's town land doesn't mean it might be the best place. Maybe there's some other places around town. I don't know. That might be.
We can only place them on public property, but there's a map of where they all are, and there's been a pretty exhaustive review of where to put them with a lot of thought given into just what you're saying. And I think we'll monitor them. And if they're seemingly not being used, then we can move them.
Yeah, I can't picture the jetties, for example, being used 6 months a year. So it was just a thought.
Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have citizen departmental committee requests and reports. Town clerk request for appointment of Board of Registrars of Voters. We haven't.
Nancy's online.
Nancy?
She's on if you have any questions.
Yes, I'm here if you have any questions. I don't really have anything further to add unless anybody has a question for me.
Okay.
Move to accept Mr. Sulzer?
Yep, just for the record, it's Jim Sulzer or James Sulzer.
Oh,
Yep.
all right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously, 4-0. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you all for your time. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Two.
Next up, the fire chief is going to review proposed ambulance fee increases. He'll go over the fees with us, and it will be a request for scheduling a public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Cranston, Fire Chief. So we're just going over proposed new ambulance rates for the fire department. They haven't been updated since April of 2022. We believe it's just good practice to review them at least every other year and entertain a motion to increase them. Do you want me to go over the actual, the figures that you see there represent a 10% increase. It just stays in line with what our expenses have been.
Yep.
And the increases there.
Does anybody have any questions? Does someone want to make a motion to schedule a public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
4-0. Next up, is Andrew on now?
No, but I'll just do it.
Okay, we need to continue. We'll open the
So-
public hearing for number 1 to continue it.
Yes, so please open the public hearing and then continue it. Our next real estate meeting is going to be January 31st, I think is the last Wednesday of January. So a continuance to that date, please.
Okay, can I have a motion to that effect?
Okay, motion to continue the public hearing until January 31st.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously, 4-0. Next up, public hearing to determine tax allocation by classification, Chapter 369, Acts of 1982 as amended, percentage of residential exemption to be granted for fiscal year 2024. Good evening, Rob.
Hi there, welcome. Thank you for having me. We've obviously postponed this several times, but here we are with not necessarily final numbers, but what we think will be very close, depending on what happens with final approval from the Department of Revenue. But as you can see, and as we've talked about before, values have certainly increased from 2023 to 2024. And down sort of at the end of this page, you can see I've plugged in so last year we had a 25% residential exemption and a 170% shift from the residential to the commercial. And the sort of graphic at the bottom of this page shows what those numbers do for from 23 to 24. So the exemption amount is close to 800,000, whereas last year it was about 670,000. The average residential value across the island, which includes vacant land as well, has gone up from about 2.7 million to just about 3.2 million, which means that the average residential tax bill that is not receiving an exemption is going from, this is an average, so about $8,600 to about just over 10,000, which is about a $1,500 increase. The average commercial value has also increased, but not as significantly as the residential values have. And that's what the commercial side looks like. The average tax bill for a commercial property last year was about 13,700, and this year it's about 14,700, so an increase of about $1,000 more or less. And then when we get to the bottom, the average year-round value, which is people that are receiving the residential exemption, has increased from about 1.7 million to just over 2 million. And this is what the average tax bill in that group looks like. It went from about $3,300 to just over $3,800. That's if you all approve a 1.7 shift and a 25% exemption. Erica, if you don't mind going to the next page real quick. Thank you. So you had asked back in September to look at what a 27.5% residential exemption looks like. And I threw in also a 30% just to get a comparison. So the top line as you go across shows based on the numbers we have right now, which our valuations were just approved this afternoon by the Department of Revenue. So 25% of the average residential value comes out to just under 800,000. It's a 1.7 shift to the commercial, which gives us right now a tax rate of $3.17, which could change as we get final approval by a penny or two. The commercial rate would be $5.37 per thousand. The average residential tax bill is 10,000. And then going across at the far right, you see the differences between 2023 and 2024. The 27.5% exemption would go up to 879,000, more or less. And what that does is, because of the way the shift works within the residential class, the average residential tax bill that is not receiving an exemption would go up by increasing the exemption by $55. Those who are receiving the exemption would go down by $233. And then all the way across, the difference is what those numbers do compared to 2023. And then the last one is the 30% exemption figure. So what we're looking for is approval of whatever percentage you want to see for the residential exemption, because I'm not supposed to make recommendations. I would say, without making a recommendation, that the current arrangement of the 1.7 and the 25% exemption seems to be working despite reservations we had back in September. I think it still is working, but that's up to you whether that's what you're going to adopt. And Erica, if you don't mind going to the last slide, part of this approval that we're seeking today are these percentages, which are based on the values of each class. So the residential class has a value of just under 35 billion. And then when you go down, you get all the way down to the bottom, the total value is just over 37 billion. And these are the percentages of what that means for, the class. The residential class would be paying 93.5973% of the amount that we're raising through real estate taxes. And then when you apply the shift, the 1.7 shift, the residential portion of that, it drops down to 89%. And then you can see how the shift affects the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes down at the bottom. So I'm happy to entertain questions and let me know.
Board members, questions, thoughts?
Remind me, what's the top end of the residential exemption that we can do? Is it 30?
Is it 35?
It's 35.
It's 35.
Okay, thanks.
In my observations is our rates are going down, but our taxes are going up, especially if you're living in an area that's being gentrified and becoming more valuable. I think people are feeling it. But at the same time, we have so many expenses heading our way. I'm afraid of, I think we should stay where we are. I don't think we should shift this year. I think we have so much coming our direction that we'd like to have that, to mitigate that at some point in the future. And the other part that's interesting is we get the average, and we get the average value, and we've also got the average residential value with an exemption. But what that means is the average without a residential exemption is quite a bit higher. It's 3.7 or something. And so there is a huge disparity between the two, someone with it and without it, because they've got a more valuable house and they don't have an exemption, and then you've got a less valuable houses on average with the exemption. And so I think the split is still substantial. I think it's fine.
I would agree. We have, the collision of capital projects coming down the line, and I think we should keep our powder dry on the exemption for the next couple of out years.
The other issue that it's one of my favorite things, but is we have to find other ways to pay for things. If we're gonna just tax everything, we've got everything we can do to get grants in or to use betterments and do other things as we move forward on some of these large projects, we're gonna have to do, or we're really gonna, it's gonna be very difficult, more difficult than it is for people now. So I think we have to start being more receptive to that, even though it's not politically popular. And we have to be, accepting maybe of, or not even maybe, we should be accepting of, doing paid parking. It's not popular, but it'll run NERDA and it'll bring a lot of money in. There's things like that that we should be thinking about. I don't think we can tax our way out of this, the backlog of stuff we have facing us. The growth that we've experienced and not paid for is coming home to roost, and I think we need to be careful with it.
Okay. Well, I would agree that I think that it's coming, that we will want to make an adjustment to the residential exemption, but I think it should be paired with a really large capital project that's not on the docket for the spring town meeting. And although the assessments are going up, the rate is going down. And I don't think this is the right year, the way the numbers shake out. It's not enough of a difference to make the shift.
I also think it's unrealistic to use the shift to level tax bills on the average home with the residential exemption, because it really doesn't reflect that the true cost for everyone of running the town is rising. And so not today, I think. I agree.
And I mean, part of it is the sheer cost of construction.
Yeah. Yeah, just if I could just interject real quick, I would say that before town meeting, when we were talking about overrides, there was an estimate put out that they would add, $400 or $500 or something like that to the average tax bill. And that's pretty much what we're seeing now. We're seeing that play out. So if you take, the 10 or 15 million or whatever the number of overrides were, and, sort of project $500 or $600 to each taxpayer based on that, I mean, that'll sort of help you look at what's coming down the pike as far as, impacts. I mean, it all plays into it.
Okay.
These are some of the largest single year ones I can remember in a while, though.
Yeah,
900
that's-
bucks for commercial, and this is, this is new territory for us. We kind of knew it was coming, but here it is. And I think, some people, again, who have in areas that are being gentrified are going to be even more surprised. So I think that, I think it's something we need to really tighten up on going forward.
You ready for a motion? Yeah. So I would move we accept the motion to close the public
yes.
hearing.
Do you want to ask if there's any public comment, or did you
Oh,
already?
yeah.
Nobody's raised their hand, but yes, let me just make sure there's no public comment on this. Okay. I'm seeing
Where are
that.
the tax hawks?
Okay,
They
so-
call me all the time.
Yeah.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously, 4-0. Now,
So motion to approve the tax rates as outlined in the presentation.
So 25% exemption and
25%
1.7%
exemption and a 1.7
Second?
Shift.
Percent shift.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously, 4-0. Okay, that finishes public hearings. Next, we have the town manager's report, our Island Home presentation of construction manager at risk program and project update.
Okay, so first off, the Construction Manager at Risk Program. I'm going to introduce John Lemieux of Vertex. Vertex is the town's owner's project manager for the Our Island Home project, and he's going to review something he reviewed with us last week, which we think is going to be of benefit for this project. John?
Good evening, everybody. John Lemieux from Vertex. Happy to be here tonight. Can everyone hear me okay? My Comcast has only just come back up after the storm, so.
Sounds fine.
All right, great. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation for you. Also here with us tonight are Dick Webb and Craig Piper from SMRT. I'll go through this. If we have any questions about their experience with CM at risk and healthcare projects, we'll certainly have them as a resource here as well. If I could ask somebody, actually, we already have it up, I think. Hold on. Okay, great. So basically for just background, there are two ways to procure projects in the Commonwealth, essentially for public work. The design bid build method of procurement, which is governed by Mass General Law, Chapter 149, and the construction manager at risk method, which is guided by Mass General Law, Chapter 149A. And where the CM at risk movement came out of was, about a few decades ago, looking at kind of the relationship of the, kind of the adversarial relationship between owners and contractors and GCs, really looking for a delivery method that would get the builder, on as part of the team, really able to add value. And as we'll talk a little bit more why we think this is such a good idea on this project. Next slide. Really with design bid build, at the end of the day, and again, the town has had some good results with design bid build projects, but at the end of the day, you don't know who that builder is until, the day you open the envelope and find out, who's provided you the lowest possible price to build this building. And really they've bid just the plans and specs, no relationship, nothing beyond that. Next slide. In summary, the big difference between the two delivery methods is that with CM at risk, you're hiring a professional services firm that will be part of your team, a firm that builds buildings, as opposed to with design bid build, you're purchasing a building that basically will be built in accordance with a set of plans and specifications. And just for reference, your design bid build projects, all your last three big projects, the intermediate school, the fire station headquarters, and the police station were all done with design bid build, and you haven't done one CM at risk yet. And we'll get into some reasons of why we think that's a good idea in just a second. Next slide. So some of the differences between the two delivery methods, design bid build is said to have lower costs initially, It's competitively bid. It's a lump sum payment at the end of the day to the builder. Clearly, most public owners are more familiar with the method. It's less paperwork. You're dealing with one contract and you don't really get to see behind the curtain. It's appropriate for simpler projects. And, while there are quality contractors, as we're seeing as costs have escalated, the pool of people who are available to do the work is getting smaller. That builder does not participate in any portion of the design phase of the project. And there's no contingencies built into their number. Anything that's a change comes out of the owner's bucket. And the owner really has little to no say on who the staff or the subcontractors are in the process. With CM at risk, it's a different, much different approach. It's a qualifications-based selection. There's a request for proposals, the qualifications that goes out first. Those firms that can show that they have experience with it are then invited to submit a proposal. During that process, you also have a chance to interview the team that's actually going to build your job, so you get to know them beforehand. There is the ability to negotiate portions of the price. You can't negotiate their fee percentage, but you can negotiate the rest of their proposal. They participate during the design phase, and why that's important, as we're planning.
We lost you.
The Our Island Home Project, ways to build certain things, a funding method. Basically, the items, and for the traditional trades, but all of the other trades, the owner participates in the buyout, getting to see who's going to be there, what they're bidding, what they're excluding, more importantly, so that we make sure that the town is a fully leveled bidding process. We also have the chance to do early release packages. When the design is partially complete, we can get out on the street and get started sooner, because you have the ability to do that with CM at risk, as opposed to design bid build, where your plans have 100%. And you say, well, why would we want to start and build a project before the plans are done? These days, with long procurement times, even in this post-COVID world, there are still some things that take a long time to get. Switchgear, transformers, lots of other electrical components, certain HVAC items. Well, if something has a 14-month lead time and you're doing design bid build and the construction period would be 14 months otherwise, you might not have that piece of equipment in time. And now the delivery of that equipment becomes your critical path item. So with CM at risk and having the builder on board early, they take that risk to procure that piece of equipment and bring it. There's a larger pool of potential firms. With CM at risk, there's a price premium. It's 4 to 6% over design bid build initially. And as we'll see when we break down the fee, you'll understand why, because the CM builds contingencies into their price, and any of those unused contingencies go back to the town at the end. Next slide. So some additional considerations for CM at risk. In general, with the island, we have the opportunity for prefab off island, panelization or modular construction. You have the ability for these folks to work with the design during the design development process to incorporate important details into the project from the beginning. As I just mentioned, the MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection trades can be brought in early to purchase those long lead items. As far as in the healthcare setting, healthcare construction is unique. The CMR process helps ensure that our builder has that experience through both the RFQ phase as well as the interview phase. There's special coordination due to unique medical, kitchen, and lift equipment. Constructability, constructability is a process where, we review plans and specs, the builder reviews plans and specs. At the end of the day, most issues on projects are not because the plans have an error in them. It's because the plans aren't coordinated right? So there's a missing handoff between maybe the electrician, the electrical designer, and the architect. this helps us, having them on board helps us really weed these things out before we get the plans on the street for the subs to bid. You also have the ability to make sure that the folks have experience with Massachusetts Department of Public Health regulations and in their involvement with, everything through the permitting and final inspections of the building. Again, I won't read all of them, but bottom line is, we want to make sure that we have a firm who's building this building to make sure that it's not only built on time and on budget, but that it opens without any issues as far as the state is concerned. Next slide. So a little bit about the price, basically, all those other projects we mentioned, for design, bid, build, you've heard about filed sub bidding, those are the 20 or so trades that the Commonwealth says are bid separately and are bid early. But they're not everything. They're, basically things like site, drywall, structural steel. That's kind of everything else. So the bids are opened on bid day, the first bid day, and we get those 20 trades or so. And then 2 to 3 weeks later, you get the one envelope that says, okay, here's who your lowest responsive and responsible bidder is for the lump sum price. Well, with CM at risk and basically the open book kind of method here, you see all of these numbers. First and foremost, there's the pre-construction fee. That's the cost for the CM to participate in the project through design. And you say, well, wait a minute, how can we bid a project that isn't fully designed yet? Well, basically what we do is we would work with SMRT and the town to come up with a rough schedule for a duration. Let's say we think this build will take 18 months, and we think the building itself will cost $70 million. We basically we tell the CM that information and say, okay, what are you going to charge us to manage the project on a monthly basis? And that's their general conditions cost. What are you going to charge us for your insurance and bonds based on a $70 million project? They'll give us those costs. The fee, this is the one thing that's not negotiable. What are you going to charge us for the fee on the project? Basically the profit on the work. With those first 4 items, we can enter into a contract with a firm. Again, we're only going to give them the notice to proceed for pre-construction. But then once we know what the actual cost of the work is, we add to that their general conditions, which we know, because we've already had it bid, their insurance and bond because we have it, and their fee, their 1.5%, 2.5%, 3% on the work. And that all together, when you add in the cost of the trade bidders and their non-trade bidders and the other allowances, you get to their guaranteed maximum price. So as you can see from an owner standpoint, you get much more data as far as what's building up my price. That at the end of the day, you have a contract with that builder. Next slide. Bottom line, some projects are considered simple enough that you don't need the CM at risk delivery method. And I think after talking about it with the project team, given the market, given the type of building that you have here, CM at risk seems to be, I would argue to be a better fit for the town for this type of project. Obviously, logistics, given the site that we're talking about for this project, there's going to be other challenges. Just being able to build the buildings that are being thought about on that site, and having a CM's input from the outset would be, we think would be very, very advantageous. Next slide. So how does the town do this if they choose to move ahead with it? Well, we just can't go ahead and do it on our own. We need the town to say yes to do this. And to do this, we would need to submit an application to the Inspector General saying that, hey, the town of Nantucket would like to utilize the CM at risk delivery method. Basically, it is a relatively boilerplate submission. It's all laid out in the Inspector General's website, what we need to do. It takes about 60 days for them to review the application. And basically, the application is an acknowledgement that we understand how to procure a CM, that your designer and your OPM have experience building under this method, that the project is significant involved enough that it merits it. And basically DCAM does CM at risk for projects of $5 million or more. I think we clearly meet the threshold from a cost standpoint and from a, for the range of complication of this project that that they would have no problem saying yes. Once we get the approval, it's a two-phase selection process, as I referenced prior. There's a request for qualifications. Again, that's a boilerplate document. We get those responses in and say, okay, these firms clearly have the experience. They've done healthcare projects. They've done CM at risk delivery method. Okay, then we invite those firms to submit an RFP, which is a price portion and a non-price portion. The price portion is, as I talked about, they bid their fee, their general conditions, their contingency percentage, and their pre-construction fee. They also give us a non-price proposal. They give us their technical approach to how they would build this project, how they would phase it. So obviously, the more information we give them, the better their responses and what they give us in their written presentation, as well as what they give us ultimately in the interview when we meet them. So I believe that's the last slide. Yes. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
I have a question, John.
Go
This
ahead.
is Matt. If we did this process and we had 2 or 3 bidders, but we weren't happy with any of them, we go through the process and, and we don't feel happy, can we say no and start again and do a design, design bid build, or are we locked in once we go down this path?
Yeah, you are not locked in. So great question. There have been projects that have pulled out of it, in the past. Another good point is once we get the RFP, once we get the responses and we get the proposals, aside from the fee, you get to take all the information into account, right? So what we'll do is we'll help level those proposals, right? Somebody may propose a 4-person team. Somebody may
Oh, John froze up.
propose a 5-person team, but in proposing a 5-ability to say, hey, wait, we do it's more flexibility than we have with the design bid build scenario.
And John, one other thing to mention is the drawings that we produce as the architect, designers, engineers doesn't change between any delivery method. They're the same set of drawings. It's just how you're procuring the construction.
Brooke?
How does it change the decision-making timeline for funding and town meeting?
So it does not change the decision timeline at all. I think what I would tell you is that having the CM on board, our goal, regardless of delivery method, is to try to get a bid in hand for that town meeting. Okay, so whether we have a CM at risk or a design bid builder. What I would say the other benefit is that with the CM without a CM, what would happen is SMRT, as we get into doing cost estimates, they'll do one, we'll do one. We'll compare those estimates and say, okay, you had X, we had Y, why do we differ? The beauty of having the CM at risk on board is instead of our firm doing the other estimate, your builder's doing the estimate. Their estimating department, the actual people who are going to be building your project, are giving you those estimates along the way. You're getting their buy-in, you're getting their information, their feedback about what works and what doesn't work in those drawings. So I think ultimately, from a timeline standpoint, doesn't matter. The only thing that we need to be able to submit the application is your as a board, your approval to pursue that method. And with the minutes from this meeting, we'll put an application together with the help of town council, who has to sign off on the process, and we're on our way, and then we're counting the 60 days.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Your comparison of the two methods indicated that there's a larger pool of potential bidders in the CMR method versus the design build bid build method. Why is that?
At this price point, this is a sophisticated project. I think you would get the interest, you're getting out of the smaller pool of GC, GCs that can bid projects over 50 million are less and less. CMs that can bid this type of work, we find that there are more choices. Again, you still have it's still Nantucket, it's still a boat ride or a plane, to get out there, to man the project and come to the meetings and those sorts of things. But I do think, I think we've talked about it with SMRT. They see a ton of CM at risk in healthcare construction. We just think, given the experience, the people that would come to this project as design bid builders from DCAM, we need to be able to tap that more private market. There aren't public nursing homes. There aren't public hospitals per se. You're going to get a room full of people who have built schools, who have built town halls. Doesn't mean they can't build this building. It just means, we don't have the ability to vet them as well. I mean, we would still, under a design bid build scenario, have to pre-qualify, just like we did on the fire station project, because it's over 10 million. And we would have that ability to look at the experience. But it's a lower bar, right? Because prior experience only counts for so many points. So even if they had zero experience with healthcare facilities, largely those GCs would be pre-qualified. Or if we were so restrictive, we'd have no GCs. So I'm not saying there wouldn't be, but given the fact of the combination of the type of project and the location, I think we have a better chance of securing a bigger pool than others. And as the gentleman said earlier, if we get a small pool, we can always go backwards. We just can't pivot. We can't pursue design bid build and then say, oh, maybe do CM at risk, because we're going to lose the 2 months. So better to start the 2 months now while the project design is in its infancy and we're in programming, and see what we can do, about that. And if it's a disappointing return, we really haven't lost much of anything. But I do think the upside is compelling on this for this type of project.
So in the internal work group, we've talked about this a couple of times already, and I fully support this approach with what we're dealing with. A nursing home is so specific in the requirements, and it's a huge dollar figure overall. So
I think
Are there
about
other
it,
questions?
basically it's cost plus. It's sort of, it's a fancy way of saying you're going to pay for everything plus give everybody a piece of it. It's sort of the fancy way of saying, it's the easy way of saying it. How do I say? Suffolk built the hospital here, and there was that was what, $89 million, $90 million with an $8 million lawsuit. I don't know where that stands. And they had an architect that knew what they were doing and did everything, but then come to find out a couple things were not as you started out, putting the metal for the operating room in the wrong place, and putting if I remember correctly, there was that, and there was some walls that should have been load bearing that had shingles on them and therefore weren't fireproof, and there was other things that happened along the way that I think hopefully we can learn from. It's like talk to people there and learn from that experience. They were 89, it wouldn't surprise me if we came in that ballpark. I think it's going to be a lot more money than we know, and I think it's the third rail, but we have to really talk about, what is the amount we can spend? How are we going to operate it after? What union concessions have to be made, and when are they going to be made so we can operate this thing? Because I don't want to be the person that signs off on a 70 million that becomes 100 that we can't even staff later. So those are, I think in some ways, I feel as though we are running full speed ahead on a third of this. And not, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong on the other 2/3, but I don't want to find that I'm not. So,
Just, sir,
John?
just for a second, I think you, just to be clear, the project team understands that there are other factors with this, right? So you bring up some wonderful points that we've already started talking about as a group. We understand the staffing piece, but not the piece that you as a town have to budget for. But there's been discussions about, housing. That 70 million is just the building. It doesn't include worker housing. And we have to, that's being looked at a little bit right now too. It doesn't include possibly, maybe we have to do some work on the force mains that run through that property and move those. That's not in the price either right now. So we're in that phase right now of trying to gather all that info so that when we come to you, for an update as we're getting closer and say, okay, I think we have a plan. Those things have all been kind of talked about. And, there's been lots of meetings. I will say we're moving full speed ahead, but not with the project and not just with the focus on the building. I think there's been a lot of discussion of a lot of different areas. And I think the team is aware that there are a number of things that need to be considered in this process, not just, okay, how are we going to build it?
and some of them, sorry.
Okay, I was going to just try and answer a couple of your
Yeah,
questions.
and I'll go after, yeah.
Okay. I think that the whole approach that we've talked about in this more preliminary fashion is that the layout of the new building would be where all of the patients are on one floor. So the operations will continue in a similar manner, in an improved manner, but in a similar staffing manner to what they are now. We've gone away from ideas of the small house model and kept with the central dining, but solving a lot of the other issues with the way the rooms are laid out and the sizes, and more utilizing any basement or second floor levels for offices and storage and like laundry and that kind of thing. And there's also been some talks about any kind of ancillary shared services that we could benefit from with Sherburne Commons. So all of this stuff is starting to be talked about. In terms of employee housing, I mean, we need that across the board for every department. There may be an opportunity to add additional employee housing at the Sherburne Commons site in conjunction with them. But also I recognize that we have land here all along Tacoma where we could build some duplex type units or single family units. So we do have options where we at least already own the land in both scenarios. So the whole package is being thought of. And then obviously we've been working on this for well over a decade. And we did get the message, I feel, from town meeting when the override got approved that people want to keep running it. Maybe the price tag will be too big, but I don't think that we stop now and shut the facility down. I think that we need to continue this process.
No, and I'll follow up. I'm not saying to shut it down. I'm saying that it's going to be a huge number that we're going to have to really wrestle with. And, let's, for argument's sake, say it's, $80 million. I mean, let's say it's $100 million at 4%. That's, if we put $100 million in the bank at 4%, you could give everybody in there, all 40 people, $100,000 a year forever to place them elsewhere and, and in places that may have employees, et cetera. So the cost of money that we're going to spend, and I want to do it here, but I want to make sure we can afford to do it. And I want to be comparing it to what are other options, and I want to make sure that we aren't building it and then, and then in negotiations for 2 years or we build it and we can't staff it like this. I want to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row. And before we do this, this is probably going to be one of the most expensive and important things that we do, but let's hope we do it right. So.
Yeah, Completely agreed. And we're thinking about all of those things. And it is going to be a really, really large price tag. Construction costs are through the roof. And this is one of the biggest things we've undertaken since the school. And since we last proposed this, prices are up. So, but yes, more to be continued, and it'll be ultimately up to the voters if they can support the overall package.
Do we need a motion to move
this
ahead with this
approach, yeah.
process? Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas to all.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
More than that? Yeah, go. You want me to go ahead? Well, we've met a few times now. I mean, I think I already touched on a lot of this. Starting to talk about all of these aspects. We've met with neighbors, and amazingly, I think only 2 people came. But maybe in the future meetings more will attend. We've met with the Sherburne Commons board, and we've met with the Sherburne Commons residents, and we've met ourselves twice. And like I said, we have started to discuss sort of the layout of all of these things, of the building, the size, the room configuration, the potential for shared services, for shared housing, for housing options for employees, and the, as well as the potential different ways to locate it on the site. That's where I believe you mentioned the sewer force main. There is a possibility of building it up towards South Shore Road and moving the existing employee housing there, and potentially moving putting a bend in the force main, which in the scheme of things, it may add a couple of $1 million, but it might be ultimately worth it in terms of how the building's located. But then there are other options as well towards the back of the site, closer to where there's some parking in Sherburne Commons, where the parking could be relocated. So all of those things are starting to be looked at. We do want to, start having these conversations about numbers so that people don't have unrealistic expectations that this is going to be a lot more than $50 million now, which I believe was what we had asked for 4 years ago, if I have that right. We're moving forward because, we continue to have issues with the current facility and its viability of continuing. Is that good?
That was excellent. Thank you so much. I just would follow up a tiny bit to remind the board that I established a working group to provide feedback for the project, and that is the group that we're talking about that's been meeting. We're going to be ramping that up in the next week. We came up with a meeting schedule the other day when the architects and the OPM were available. And we've met with town departments earlier this week and started reviewing sort of preliminary permitting and approval requirements and what we're looking at in those areas. We're talking about visiting another sort of fairly recently built facility, and we're trying to work out when to go and do that. And the working group is planning to develop some informational materials that would be available at the 2024 annual town meeting to start hopefully getting people up to date with where we are with the project. And like we said, an appropriation request hopefully to be made to the 2025 annual town meeting. Then we can start on the senior center at the current Island Home site. But that's just a little update we wanted to give of where we are.
I've got a high school roommate who's in the business in Connecticut. There's no old, none of these assisted living are really being built like they used to be. It's changing. The whole thing is changing. And so I think, we'll be one of the few that is building. And then one in Suffolk was a high school friend. So if we wanted someone from there to come and meet with your group and talk about that, I think we could probably do that too, so.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. Next up, we have the select board report. Oh, no, I'm sorry, on town manager's continued preliminary review of town-sponsored warrant articles for 2024.
Okay, so we're at outline number 7 of preliminary town meeting warrant articles. And I've got a few updates that have come forward from last week. First off, we have 3 draft articles that have been submitted by BPAC, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, regarding e-bikes and helmet requirements. Those are currently under legal review, and they are likely to undergo some amount of change. One of them was seeking to amend regulations, which don't go to town meeting, and the other, there's some little things like fees, which were above the statutory maximum, things like that. So we're going to get the legal review underway and fix those up and bring them back to you. I think I'm still waiting for a bit of direction on rental car bylaw changes. There's an amendment that town council put forward in an email from last week or the week before, and I'm not sure if the board was wanting to go with that or not. So it doesn't necessarily need to be decided tonight, but.
Comments?
Yeah, on that, so just so I understand, basically what we would be doing is cleaning up the existing bylaw to add car sharing or individuals renting their cars to other people to the definition of a rental car on Nantucket so that it comes under the bylaw, right?
That is my understanding, and my further understanding is it was legally fuzzy.
And then the question is, if we choose to do that, what is the possibility or potential to actually enforce it? And are we creating an enforcement discrepancy between one group of rental cars and another group of rental cars if one is kind of, practically speaking, much more difficult to track and enforce, would be the question I would have.
I think the answer is yes. Okay. Because
So
yep.
you know, I think the intention is good in terms of broadening the definition. I just don't want to create an unintended consequence that is problematic, that actually makes what we're doing now in terms of enforcing the rental car bylaw more difficult or inequitable.
Yeah, like you're
In a way.
basically, I
Do you
think
know what I'm
if I hear you correctly, you're saying that if we change it, could it be used against us? Because we can argue now that these are rental cars and they fall into the definition. If we attempt to change it, are we weakening our own position? Are you sort of saying that?
Well, kind of. I think I'm saying something a little different, right? So we have a definition and an enforcement mechanism, right? So I would say that when this subject came to us, there were a small group of people who were advertising multiple cars for rent. And that felt like it clearly fell within the bylaw, right? And the police chief took action, reached out and explained that this wasn't a non-compliant practice to those folks. Now, what we do in terms of the medallions and giving access to medallions to those small businesses who are clearly, through their advertising and their websites, renting multiple cars, right? So that's sort of one category. And then we have I have an extra vehicle that I occasionally put out on Turo. I don't, but were I to do that, our ability to find and enforce someone like that who's renting a car, if that's included in the bylaw, now creates a discrepancy between enforcing at Avis, enforcing at these small businesses, and enforcing to individuals. I think where the grayest area is there are folks using Turo who are renting multiple vehicles, who are in essence a car rental agency, but they're using a platform that is different from what these other small businesses who are advertising. So I think that's where it gets complex to me. And if we're not enforcing evenly within that sort of set of Turo vendors, then are we setting up room for complaint from the other two groups that the enforcement is inequitable? Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Clear as mud.
yeah.
It's having an impact on, on the, the existing businesses. It's having an impact on the airport. It's something that's been growing for 3 years, 3 summers now that we've known about. And so I think we're not going to solve it on a Wednesday night. I think the whole idea of, of maybe clawing back rent, some of the I don't want to go over 700, but if we can claw back some of the 700 and allocate them somehow, I might be in favor of doing that, but that needs to be studied, and I don't know how we're going to do that between now and then. I could see doing that. I am adamantly opposed to, opening it up because there's nothing we can do. You can't, what business is next? And the people are calling it a business. They're not saying this is I'm sharing my car and I have to share my car. They're saying I'm running a business. And so which is fair enough, if they're, but so.
I'm definitely in favor of making sure that all of the medallions that are available are actually in use. I think that we need to tighten that up 100%. I do think it's really muddy, changing these regulations, kind of similar to between taxis and Uber and real estate offices and Airbnb kind of thing. But I think that we've taken the position that those are rentals, particularly the ones that are doing multiples, and that they should try and get legal, and maybe they can if the medallions become available. I think overall, at some point, we need to really analyze what kind of transportation needs the island really has and what the right amount of ways to get at that are, because I don't know for sure that if there were more rental cars or more taxis, those vehicle trips would be taken care of, and maybe there wouldn't be as many. I think it's very hard to analyze, but I don't know how the numbers were figured out the first time around in terms of the limits on both of those things, on both taxis and rental cars. Was it arbitrary? Was it really based on something? And what are the real needs of the island? I mean, there's a lot of cars coming on and off the steamship, and there's a lot of rental cars that actually come over on the steamship from off island. Is that sort of the best thing to be happening? Could we get people to, if there was on-demand bus service, could more go towards that? I just don't know exactly what the answer is. Is it better for someone to rent a car for a week, or do they just need to rent something for a day to meet their needs? So just some thoughts.
The people that I know that rent, a lot of people that I know that rent, that come for a week and rent a car from a day, they are everywhere with that thing. They're one side of the island to the other, out to Great Point. If they're spending $500 for the day, they're going to get their $500 worth, and they do. And so they're going to be used at a higher rate than, my car sitting in the driveway because I'm in the bed, I'm baking all day, I'm walking home. I mean, it's sort of, some of this is, you can figure out with common sense. Some of it, I don't think there will be a way to know. I think it's, it's, some of it, we did some of it with consultants in the comp plan days. It's, we think we may still track the number of vehicles that are here at any one time and when they come over, et cetera. But some of the concerns when it did happen was for the things people were seeing happening that we were worried were going to be worse. And it was the boats full of rental cars coming over and some of them not being used. And so I believe that number came from a slight increase from the amount that we hear then, but we just said, hey, that's fine, but we don't want it to be double this or 5 times this every spring. coming over and back and over and back and loading the boat up each way. I mean, that was the rationale, and we don't like, so, you know, and we wanted to encourage people to take the bus and to come, you know, do those types of things, which is all the things we're talking about now. And so I think, you know, this is something that, this would be a good topic to, you know, have MPDC and Mike Burns put some time in with facts and come back with it at some point, you know, spend a couple months on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the legal gray in this is also, you know, we could go out on a limb in terms of defining a Turo rental as a rental car and then really have difficulty legally enforcing it as well. And I think I would want to be a little clearer on what the legal landscape is on this. And you know, sometimes Nantucket gets ahead of the curve on something, and that's what we do. But I also don't want to do it and put, you know, have it ultimately another bylaw that is completely unenforceable, that people have an expectation of enforcement that doesn't happen. So.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree that the medallions that are out there should be used, and that the Turo issue is complicated legally, and I'm not sure that enforcing something. I mean, I mean, John's on; he could comment if he wants, or a later time. But getting into private contracts and, you know, private parties between, you know, in Brooke's fictitious example, between her and somebody else, I don't know how you not selectively enforce that and have it equitable across the board. That sounds very legally tough to do, and maybe just way out of scope for the incoming police chief and the force to even think about doing. But I agree with you on tightening. I agree with the chair on tightening up the existing regulations and making sure that the medallions are used and not held back.
Then we can get off this other stuff, I'm sure, but I have another way to look at it. We know that when we don't go door to door every day to see who's running an illegal kitchen. You know, we know it happens occasionally. We know that those things are happening. If we find out about it, then the Board of Health goes over and says, hey, you have to do X, Y, and Z and come up to code, or you can't come up to code at all here, depending what it is. And then we deal with it. I don't see a huge difference with this. I can't imagine that we're gonna sit and stop every car and ask, but I think when it comes to our attention, we should deal with it like we've so far done. I think that, you know, there's a lot of rules, a lot of laws that, you know, they're there, but you don't, you know, the speed limit. Everyone goes a little bit over the speed limit, but it's there. And I think that we are fortunate that this is already in place, and it's been in place for a long time. And so, you know, so now we have to just think, you know, we have to sort of figure out what's the right way to, you know, to keep it in place with, you know, anyway, and amend it if needed.
Hillary Rayport, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I did. Dawn, can you hear
ahead.
me?
Yep, go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks. I would very much like to see a Turo car or other car share defined as a rental car as a first step at this town meeting. I know there's a lot of longer term issues to be worked out, but I think if you don't define it as a rental car, then you're basically saying it's not a rental car. And I just don't see how it's in the interest of the long range transportation plan or the select board's plan for Nantucket to have vacationers coming here saying, oh, great, we can get a Turo for the week. I mean, we really want people not in vehicles, and making a big investment now with fare free and electric buses and bike paths. And it just seems to be working against us. And So I would really like to see a definition so that people at least know, guess what? This is a rental car and there are policies in place for that. And if people want to break the law, there are always going to be some people who do that. But I think if we can make it clear, then we'll make it clear for the people who do want to be law abiding. Thank you.
Moving on. Okay. Whether or not the board wants to put forward its own short-term rental article remains kind of outstanding. New items. Coastal resiliency districts. There's been some email today with town council and staff about the articles that will be needed for this. So that is very actively in the works. The year-round housing deed restriction program. There is a draft that's been submitted by town council, and I think that's under review by staff as well. And we have some new real estate articles, at least one or two of which is going to require home rule petition. So that was a section I was just going over, home rule. Other real estate related, so we will have 31 Western Ave as most likely a standalone warrant article subject to a debt exclusion or contingent upon a debt exclusion. And we've got some additional real estate transactions. I don't know if Andrew is able to make it on.
Yeah, he's on.
Okay. Okay, Andrew, do you want to just give a little quick summary of these things? If you can. I know he was having trouble with his internet. Okay, well, I'll if he can come back on, that's great. But otherwise, there's some information in your packet. It's mostly transactions between the town and the land bank and/or potentially the Sconset Trust, and it seems like it's acquiring unnamed ways and little bits of parcels here and there to acquire them by eminent domain, so we can clear the title, and then they'd be transferred to the land bank. And some of that's going to require town meeting, home rule petitions. There is also an authorization article to acquire some parcels on Bartlett Road for a sewer pump station, and that would be in connection, this is looking ahead, but it would be in connection with the Somerset Needs Area Sewer Extension. And so that most likely would ultimately turn out to be a purchase. So at a future town meeting, we would need some funding for that, but this is just the authorization to acquire to see what we can potentially work out with the property owner. And then conveyances of some different paper streets. I think that's pretty much just what these are. And again, they're in your packet with a map, so. Maybe Andrew can come on next time with his internet.
Okay.
Function. And that, I think, was it for updates.
Brooke?
So I wanted to talk about the increase in salary for select board members. I think with the town council study committee, I've been thinking this over, that it feels like that should any significant change in our compensation should wait until that process moves a little farther ahead. But I think we should talk about an adjustment of some kind, perhaps, because there hasn't been one in a long time. And I know some of you are very reluctant to vote raises for yourselves. So, but I think an adjustment maybe from 3,500 to 5,000, and then for the chair to 7 or something like that might be appropriate, just to reflect cost of living over the last decade or so, at least since the select board compensation was adjusted. So something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's been even longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other question. My understanding, Article 83, we were going to get a recommendation from NPDC or Planning Board. This was Hillary's article last year to change the makeup, and they were going to work on it. And then I think I've heard through the grapevine that it was going to, they are not going to bring something forward. Is that correct? Who's on?
I am, so I can answer that. I mean, it has been an extensive discussion, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. I think the current feeling is that it just might not be able to be publicly vetted well enough before town meeting. So maybe I think that if there was a fall town meeting, it would definitely be ready, but everyone wants the NP and EDC members to agree, and then to really vet it with everyone and figure out the best makeup, since it's a process just to finish changing it, as we know. I believe that, the hope is to get, I mean, this may just be for me, but the hope is to get the proponents and the people who voted for the prior article on board with whatever the NP and EDC proposes too.
Right, and that in an ideal world, that would be
Yeah.
what I would like to see. I think there was a lot of, I think the support for some of the changes, and some of it makes a lot of sense. I'm bringing it up because that was a home rule and we sent it, and if it's not on this year again, then we're back to square one, and then it's not, we could put Hillary's article ourselves back on, have it voted and sent again, but if we wanted, I don't think anything's gonna happen in Boston. I think it was thoroughly, sort of, just undermined in Boston. I'll put it however you want to say it. It was an interesting hearing. And I talked about that a couple nights after I was part of the hearing. I think that, so anyway, we as a board, do we want to bring 83 back in some manner? Do we want to wait? I think that's something we should talk about.
Matt, as you're saying that, I just realized that normally I do put the home rule petitions that were approved from a prior year on this list, and I'm seeing now that I didn't somehow do that. So there should be a decision by
Yeah.
the board, and but thank you for mentioning it, because now I really need to double check and make sure there wasn't anything else that I didn't mistakenly not put on.
Do we normally resubmit home rules that were citizen petitions?
Not automatically.
Right,
You
we do
determine
ones
if you're
that were
going to or
board
not.
driven.
Yeah.
Tom?
Libby, I believe that the legislative session is in its first of 2 years at the moment, and that home rule petition is good for, as you know, the 2 years. I think that's fine for a year, but that should be checked, of course.
Yeah, all right, if it's fine for 2 years, then we don't have to worry about it, but I'd hate to have it drop and then have, we're on year 3 of discussions of this, and then have this, be moving at the speed of government and not change too, because there's some important things that we need to address, so.
I mean, the NPTC really has been working on this diligently, and I know the chair would have liked to have had something ready, but I don't think that everyone was confident at the moment, and, that could change, but at the moment, I just don't think that there was the feel that there was enough time to really, really vet it out to the general public.
Yeah, and I've had some conversations with the chair about, it feels like there's a really broad discussion about all the possibilities of who should be represented on NP and EDC, and broader even than Article 83. And so I, for one, feel as though that conversation needs to be full-throated and happen with all the constituencies among those recommended areas. I know Human Services is one that has come up, and for me, I think that that's a great opportunity if that is the direction that they go. And so, that wasn't contemplated in Article 83. So I think that they're doing a good job of really saying, what are all the possibilities, and then narrowing it down. So that process feels good to me, and I feel like we should let it go through to its logical end, and I think the chair is committed to that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about adding a human services portion, a cultural portion, an equity portion, a business chamber of commerce portion. So it's been a really productive discussion, and it's about number of seats, makeup of seats, and who's the appointing authority for the seats, or elected. So it's very broad what's being talked about, but it's also very well organized, and everyone's really trying to think it through within the membership, obviously open to any public input. And I can't imagine that something wouldn't be ready for next year. Anything else?
Not for town meeting, no.
Okay. Next up, we have Select Board's reports and comments. Notice of approval of purchase and sale agreement for 31 Western Avenue, former Star of the Sea Youth Hostel, pursuant to vote in executive session taken on December 7th, 2023. So should I just obviously we've entered into an agreement for the purchase of this, pending a vote of town meeting as well as a vote at the ballot. And I think Brooke wanted to add some additional color.
Yeah, I think I wanted to add a little bit of color about the discussions that we had at the select board level and sort of where this fits in among other things. And I think in the larger context of housing for seasonal and year-round employees, there's sort of two pieces to this proposed acquisition that the board really wanted the voters to weigh in on, whether they want to invest in locking up this asset and ensuring that it stays as a public asset in this way, but also as a potential important component or piece of the puzzle around our initiative to make sure we have adequate housing for seasonal and year-round employees. And this property has a unique, it has been used for lifeguard housing and could continue to be used for lifeguard housing. And frankly, for me, what better a spot than a life-saving station for lifeguard housing? In an idealized version, dollars apart. It also has a number of housing units that could be rehabbed into year-round housing for town employees, which is sort of a bonus. And then we'll be looking at it in the context of other alternatives. We're doing some seasonal employee housing on Waite Drive. There's a proposal for an additional building, which this may replace that or be additive to that. And we're going to be doing a lot more research on the cost of owning this historic asset, rehabbing it, maintaining it long-term. But I think the other potential is that there are, because it's such an important piece of preservation of history, there are other potential resources of investment into this property from the preservation side of things that might help mitigate the overall cost relative to some of the other options we have for seasonal employee housing. So I think the community, we will be doing more information about this in between now and town meeting to sort of help the voters understand how it fits in to the bigger picture and why we really wanted to make sure all of you out there had the opportunity to say yay or nay about this.
Okay. Next up, we have a strategic plan update.
Okay, so there's some documents in your packet, and we've got Janet Schulte online. Janet's been our strategic planning. Yeah, that'd be great. So Janet, jump in if I'm not saying something correctly. She's been shepherding our plan. So back in on October 23rd, the board had its annual strategic plan retreat, at which time you had lots of discussion about potential updates to the plan, and you all, in fact, agreed to some changes, which have now been worked in to an updated draft, which is in your packet. And if you vote to adopt the updated plan, then that will become our new guide for a lot of our activities. And our next step will be to work with staff to establish implementation teams for the goals of each focus area. And following up on a suggestion I made a couple of weeks ago, I very tentatively assigned one board member to act as a liaison to each focus area. And that was, I think I sent that out by email today. And the liaison would not meet every single time we have a meeting about the goals, but from time to time, we'd bring you in to get feedback, input, questions. You would become the sort of expert in that focus area so that, you could explain things at board meetings or to the public or wherever about where we are with that particular area. So I was just putting out there, housing, Dawn, transportation, Matt, environmental leadership, Brooke, efficient and effective town operations, Tom, healthy and vibrant community, Malcolm. And you are more than free to move that around. It was just a kind of a starting point based on your interests that I have observed to date. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So
I would think that that would be where he'd be happy.
okay. Janet, do you want to add anything if through the chair, if that is okay to ask, that I might not have covered sufficiently?
Yeah, I would note that there have been several committees doing various kinds of planning work around the town, and several of those were incorporated into this document too, which reflects the organic nature of this document and the work that many members of the community are doing. So it really is becoming a guiding tool for the town.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you for mentioning that because it really is becoming a guiding tool for the town. Like Janet was saying, we're really we're working hard to operationalize it throughout the department so that when people are considering new programs or initiatives or operational things, it is connected to one of the goals.
Brooke?
And I'm new on capital program committee, but part of our rankings for capital projects is there's a line for how does it align with directly to the strategic plan. So it is being incorporated across all facets of decision making, which is really great.
Very good. I said great.
So if you're all good with the revisions that were made, it would be helpful to have a vote to adopt the amended plan or updated plan.
Is
to
everybody
adopt.
ready? Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously 4-0. I mean, this is just proving to be a great process.
The document
overall.
looks really good.
Thank you, Janet, for all your work.
Thank you very much, Janet.
Have a great holiday.
Hi,
Janet really pushes us along and nags along the way. Not nags, in a good way, Janet. A good way, in a good way. It's helpful.
She's
Holds
owning the
accountable.
process.
She is making everybody on the process, which is really good. Okay, if we're moving on to the next item, continued discussion of fiscal 25 general fund budget recommendations. You all had some discussion about this last week. I wanted to just quickly review a comment that Matt made about a proposed project manager position. I don't think I correctly articulated what work we've been doing going back as far as 2017 on project management, trying to grapple with project management. And we recognized in 2017 that we had a gap of having a lot of funded and unfunded projects, but not enough oversight of them to get them off the ground and moving. So we put out a bid for project management software, which was called Team Dynamics. It turned out to be incredibly burdensome and not really particularly user-friendly and really not right for municipal use. So in 2018, we put Chuck Larson into our manager of strategic projects, we were calling it. So he was to kind of shepherd through the strategic projects. And to support that, in 2019, Assistant Town Manager Greg Tivnan's role became, we as you know, added another Assistant Town Manager position, and Greg became really the additional shepherd of strategic or special projects, and their roles were to focus on these projects. Our projects, though, are so huge that they tend to become really all-encompassing with only a few of them because they get to be complex, and then other things happen like PFAS, and then people have to be redirected to address those things. So since 2019, we've put forward an additional project manager position that was funded but never really got off the ground because COVID happened and we didn't get enough applicants. The concern was that it wasn't paying enough, and then moving into 2021 and 22, people want to work remotely. They don't, the housing is a problem. So along the way, though, we've been doing other project management positions to take on a more focused approach to certain things like cybersecurity, stormwater, public records. And as you know, we mentioned this last week, had a position that was intended to be kind of a committee overseer, but now has become the Public Records Access Officer pretty much full-time, and communications. So we've been moving people around, essentially. Sustainability is another one, to take advantage of expertise through the hiring process, but to focus more of these internal people on our projects. But we just need more of it. So that's really what we're all about here. I just wanted to mention it.
And Libby, I understand all that. My point is it may need to be even raised to another level and stick them in their own place and put, et cetera, so that it turns over when a person leaves and you're bringing people underneath. I mean, it's kind of gotten away from us just with PFAS, and some of the things have been added, and we've got a huge list that's heading our way that I don't,
Yeah.
that you're right to be worried about how we're going to do it.
Yep.
So I was just sort of offering a strategic way to structure it,
Yes.
possibly to get to it. That's
Got you. And thank you for that, Matt, and for the recognition of the kind of daunting task here of project management. I think last
Tom?
week, sorry.
Libby, just for my own interest, and also maybe for the public, project management for a municipality is very specific qualifications, right? It's not somebody just can't apply and do it. You have to have some serious experience in doing it. Am I correct?
Well, ideally, yes. I mean, if we had somebody who's managed construction projects, and it's not just constructions projects, it's other things that come up, like, managing the strategic plan and the implementation of it. It's obviously very, very helpful to have municipal experience with those types of things. Is it 100% necessary? Maybe not. But there is a big advantage to it, because can be quite different from private management of projects, because there's so many more regulations and things that have to be considered with a municipal project. The only other thing I think that came up last week, which was addressed in a follow-up email to the board, had to do with the cancer screening program for firefighters. And there's ongoing discussions, as you know, between the town and the fire union on that. And I didn't know if the board had any other questions or follow-ups or anything like that from the presentation. If you don't, that's fine. And if you think of more later, that's fine too, because we have another meeting to talk about this at the public hearing on January 10th. And then after that, we would ask that the board endorse whatever you want to endorse for the budget, either as presented or with whatever tweaks you all would vote on as a board. And then we move it on to the finance committee.
I mean, the only thing that I was kind of had on my wish list this year was to increase the human services budget, because there's so many more requests, but the budget is so tight that I don't know if that's feasible. And in terms of the firefighters, because that is a union negotiation, we will be discussing that on January 11th in executive session.
We do have some things that are kind of on our if funding frees up list. We have a few things that we'd want to do, and we could add human service to that. I'm not holding out a whole gigantic amount of hope for that, but it's possible as things shift around in the budget that things might get freed up here and there.
Okay, any other thoughts? If not, committee reports. You pretty much already got mine on all the Island Home work group stuff.
trying to think. Oh, the only thing we did get an email that Ashley Erisman has passed her Massachusetts Concom training certificate that came to all of us, and she did that while she was on the Concom and has finished it recently. So congratulations to Ashley.
Brooke?
I'll just add that on the solid waste side, that there's ongoing and active activity on the RFP for the operations for the landfill. So that continues to go apace.
Okay, great. Okay, last meeting of 2023, guys. Who wants to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
See you next year.
Next year.